All nations used more than one type of firearm during the First World War. The rifles most commonly used by the major combatants were among the Allies, the Lee Enfield, the M1891 6.5mm, and the Mosin Nagant M1891 7.62. The Central Powers employed the Steyr Mannlicher M95 and the Mauser M9 8G 7.92mm. The American Springfield used a bolt-action design similar to this modern-day Chipmunk 22. A closely copied Mauser's M1989 that the U.S. government had to pay a licensing fee to Mauser, a practice that continued until America entered the war. During World War I, snipers appeared as deadly sharpshooters in the trenches. They had modified rifles and were issued rifles with scopes on top to allow for better aim at longer distances. The pistol was a less powerful, self-loading gun that came from a magazine loaded into the bottom of the handle. It was used as a secondary to their more powerful primary for when it ran out. When war began, there were three types of pistol in general use: revolvers, clip-loaded automatics, and the so-called blowback models, where expanding propellant gas caused the gun to reload by forcing the bolt back when fired. Combat shotguns were guns used for the offensive role during the war. The earliest shotguns were designed for trench warfare. While it had minimal range, the multiple projectiles coming out of a shotgun shell provide an increased hit probability unmatched to small arms. Most machine guns of World War II were based on a Hiram Maxim's 1884 design. They had a sustained fire of 450 to 600 rounds per minute, allowing defenders to cut down attacking waves of enemy troops like a scythe cutting wheat. There was some speculation that the machine gun would completely replace the rifle. Contrary to popular belief, the machine guns were not the most lethal weapon of the Great War.
Hiram Maxim was a late 19th century rival to brilliant engineers like Thomas Edison and the Wright brothers. His many inventions included a mousetrap and even an early aircraft, which might have made his name and fortune if it had flown. In 1883, he patented a new fully automatic machine gun, an invention inspired by direct personal experience. Maxim's eureka moment came while at rifle practice with friends in Savannah, Georgia. The thumping recoil was giving him painful kicks in the shoulder, and he was getting tired of doing all the reloading himself. It suddenly occurred to Maxim to use one problem to solve the other. Could the force of the recoil be used to reload the weapon automatically? Back at the drawing board, Maxim found an ingenious way to do it. The key components, the barrel and the bolt. When the cartridges fire, both are forced backwards by the recoil. Then the barrel is pushed forwards again by a spring flipping out the spent cartridge. Meanwhile, the bolt is pushed forwards by another spring, loading and firing the next shot. Thanks to the recoil, the gun reloads and fires itself with no assistance. Now Maxim was in the machine gun business. A friend told him,
"If you want to make a pile of money, invent something which will enable the Europeans to cut their throats with greater facility."
So Maxim moved to London and unleashed a sales offensive that matched brilliant engineering with flamboyant public relations. A series of high-profile publicity stunts spread news of the machine gun around the world. Power brokers from all nations were invited to fire the weapon for themselves. In the decades following 1887, Hiram Maxim sold his devastating new weapon to all the major powers. Then in 1914, Britain and France went to war with Germany. The rest of Europe and finally the United States were dragged into the conflict. This was the Great War, later known as World War I. Millions of men were mobilized. But despite the rise of the machine gun, vast armies were still trained to attack with rifle and bayonet. Armies on both sides had the same objective: to cross the no man's land between the trenches and kill the enemy in close quarters combat. On July 1st, 1916, the British and their allies commenced the Battle of the Somme with an attack that crossed no man's land, involving 200,000 men. A preemptive artillery bombardment was designed to destroy the German defenses. But the German machine gunners took shelter in deep bunkers, then moved rapidly into position. By this stage of the war, they had developed highly effective machine gun tactics. In World War I, the Germans could protect a section of trench with just 2 machine guns on the flanks. Each gunner kept a predetermined arc as close as he dared to his own lines. When the enemy attacked, the gunners did not open fire straight away. They waited until the attackers entered the killing zone. The interlocking arcs of fire created an impenetrable wall of lead. The British infantry were utterly decimated by machine gun fire from the flanks. The first day of the Battle of the Somme was the greatest loss of life in British military history. All down the line, the attackers were met by a maelstrom of interlocking fire from pairs of German machine guns. 20,000 men were lost. Attacking enemy machine guns was a suicide mission, and the World War degenerated into a bloody stalemate. Final machine gun casualties on all sides had been estimated at 5.5 million. In the words of historian Sir Basil Liddell Hart, statesmen found themselves puppets in the grip of Hiram Maxim, who had paralyzed the power of attack. All efforts to break the defensive grip of the machine gun were in vain.